Oh, I see.
I'll try.
Great. Testing. How's that? Hear me in the back? Okay, great.
Closer.
Thank you. Well, happy Memorial Day weekend to all of you. And thank you for your rendering of the boxer. That was just superb. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm good on time. 2 parts. Jan asked if I would bring back a talk I gave here, I don't know how long ago, on moral injuries. And it seems very appropriate because the moral injuries continue at unprecedented rates today. The malignancy continues to metastasize, and we're all victimized by it. So I want to read this to you, and then I want to suggest some, I don't want to call them techniques, but some ideas for you to consider in, I think I want to say it this way, retrieving your own legacy as the powers that be continue to tell us what our legacy should be. And it's an outright lie. So here we go. Being wounded on any level offers us a new way of seeing. Something is exposed to the light of psychic and emotional life that invites the sacred into its precinct, its domain, its territory. Being wounded is territorial, both terrible and insightful. The question I ask is, what can we learn by these deep injuries to our soul? Because my understanding, and I'm an avid reader, have been for 20 years, of Pema Chodron's work, that there's wisdom there. If we can be reflective and patient enough to let it begin to surface. But I'm interested in pursuing the wound further. Yes, we can be mortally wounded, but we can also be morally wounded, as Larry Kent Graham outlines in his book, Moral Injury, Restoring Wounded Souls, a brilliant study. Other writers have also expressed growing interest in this sphere of being. Where the body is wounded, afflicted, infected, and inflected by illness, so can the soul be morally wounded, afflicted, and inflected as well. It too needs healing, every bit as much as any physical assault on us or even by us. For we are, of course, capable of both. Before I take up Graham's explorations of moral injury for just a few minutes, I want first to explore the pioneering work of Edward Tick with American veterans of war and the traumas of combat as a preface to affirming the power of moral injuries. Then to the main thrust of this presentation on Graham's equally cutting-edge exploration of the ways that we can find ourselves paralyzed in life by moral dissonance, moral distress, and his search for ways to aid us in such often debilitating conditions. But first, I want to be forthright about what has driven me to consider what moral injuries are and why they're crucial to recall, name, reframe, and revise, not sweeping them under the carpet, which is a metaphor for the unconscious, where they can really do damage. Some of the language I just used is from Graham's moral injury book. For the past 2 years, since the Trump presidency has been in place, this is the first time around, but it also is this time around. I have felt assaulted by the president's outrageous behavior that I believe has been tearing apart some of the most cherished qualities and values of our country. I found myself assaulted by new insults to reason, to fair play, to those who are on the margins, including myself, as well as the violent rhetoric he spews and the lies he propagates without flinching or ever admitting that what he said one day has been proven false soon after. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I want, however, to recover the major influence on me to pursue this contagious realm of moral injury. I also found myself angry at his incompetence, of his reveling in his own ignorance, and his lack of desire or felt need to learn about the office he now holds as of this writing and prior to the midterm elections. I felt the wounds of outrage piling up in me, as well as the moral outrage over a Congress that largely remains silent, impotent, and complicit in his words and actions as he rampages on decency and on the traditions of our country which have been trampled. I also felt the growing number of injuries suffered by so many by the conscious stoking of foreign agents, reinforced from within our country, of divisiveness that continues to turn our citizenry on one another. I found myself regularly yelling back at the television during an onslaught of reporting or in the presence of the president's slanders and mean-spirited invectives that he tosses off to impress a crowd of acolytes hungry for such spittle. The moral injury gathered in me from what I felt was misleading, downright deceitful, and continually wounding to the nation as a whole, regardless of one's party loyalty. His behavior has only increased in reckless abandon of most of us citizens. I began to ask what was happening to me, such that I found little peace during the day as I carried around with me stories, reports, speeches, and violent attacks on others that demeaned the presidency and all of us nationally. I felt bruised and even dismembered as constant conditions when the rhetoric both accelerated and intensified. I recognized that I was also the culprit in my self-wounding as I was sucked into the field of influence, a vortex of violence, and a betrayal of human decency. I write these words not too distant from the midterm elections, rather than waiting to hear what and how they may change my and others' perspectives. We just don't know. So this presentation is dated. It is written at a particular moment in history and is open to revision and editing as events unfold. Further, to my surprise, when I returned to one of my earlier books entitled Writing Myth, Mythic Writing, Plotting Your Personal Story, that in a couple of chapters on wounding, I had already been voicing the deep emotional and psychological and spiritual wounds we can self-inflict or have inflicted on us by others, or that we have the capacity to inflict on others. I have discovered how Ed Tick, Jonathan Shea, Larry Graham have helped me deepen my appreciation of this malady of modern politics. I hope to continue to bring part of this work, as well as those of Graham and Tick, into view. I now add Pema Chodron's recent book, Welcoming the Unwelcome, and I can't recommend it enough. But first to Ed Tick's work, specifically in Warrior's Return, Restoring the Soul After War, that follows his earlier work. Thank you, Pam. Sorry about the rough throat. War and its trauma, Ed Tick believes, separated them from their soul life. Their moral injury grew from their soul separation and encouraged such a traumatic divorce. Tick relabels the trauma from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which he senses trivializes the wound, to post-traumatic soul division, PTSD, a far worse malady than a more innocuous stress-related suffering. He calls it thus because of his understanding that it is a moral trauma, not only a psychological condition. He furthers this idea by suggesting that PTSD can be suffered by an entire nation's soul. And I think that is, in large measure, where we are right now. As well as has the capacity to sterilize a culture. I believe that my earlier description of my own rage and feelings of insult because of the current poisonous political climate has the capacity to bring such a condition, to many. To say nothing of our grief over our many militaries involved in wars in many locales, most especially in the current fabricated war with Iran. I believe we all carry that conflict deep in our own unconscious and are affected by it daily, even as it hides beneath the floorboards of consciousness. While I am right here on wars currently in production, Tick mentions in his study that since the founding of our nation, since its founding, we have not been at war with someone for a total of 12 years. We are a warring nation. But it doesn't have to be. He also clearly points out how many veterans are in anguish over the ways hostile, demeaning, neglectful, political, patriotic, or gratuitous they were greeted upon return. They carry the traumatizing consequences of being dishonored back to the country that was so willing and encouraging to send them there. One young Iraq veteran he homes in on was refused a VA disability rating, benefits, or help. In early 2011, he left a suicide message that declared, quote, "Maybe they'll finally see my invisible wound when they stare at my flag-draped coffin. Maybe then the wound will be apparent." Yeah. Okay, that's good. So now I'm going to skip to the second part, and I'm So grateful to have the time not to have to fly through these. One, as I mentioned to you, is that each of us has the capacity to create our own legacy, our own legends, and not have someone else's stuffed down our throat. That's a big one. Another one. These are just for you to think about. I've tried several of these, and I'm still working on this page for myself. But I thought, I want to share it with you this morning. Upheavals in our lives can lead to retrieval. Upheavals can lead to retrievals. What retrievals? A time when you felt most joyful. You felt a sense of wholeness in your life that had been seduced by the larger cultural malice of those in power. But that can be a choice, not a prescribed destiny. Another one. Consider writing a description of that less stressful period when you felt, and we have that interesting phrase, more yourself. I don't feel like myself. That's a common response because we can lose track of who we are. It's not baked in, but it can go underground. Another one. Given that today is part of our National Memorial Day weekend, I ask that those who are in or have served in the military be remembered by you right now. I have learned from many years of reading Buddhist psychologist Pema Chodron that the ego has a tendency to want to separate all that is negative or challenging in us and prefer only to remember our goodness. And she believes, take it how you will, that is an impossibility. Because if we don't take in what is weakest in us, we can never see the wholeness of who we actually are. False. Response to the one that I just read you. Such splitting creates even more stress. She tells us in Welcoming the Unwelcome that embracing both positive and negative aspects of our living should be allowed to occupy the same psychic and emotional space. I don't find that easy to do, but I try to work on it. Befriending our own darkness can be a deeper path to wisdom, of a whole sense of who we are each day. Finally, be kind and generous to yourself every hour of every day. This can be a challenging gesture, but when you do, then let it spread out to kindness for every other person, known or unknown, who is suffering as you and I have been. Thank you very much.